Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's Workshop. So today is December 25th, 2023, and I want to say a very Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. And I want to thank you for being here today. I have a very special video prepared for you. We are sharing the video footage of the grand opening of the Dress Shop Showroom. So it's really exciting. I'm actually going to share with you the days leading up to the actual grand opening and including the actual opening. So many wonderful things have happened among the dolls, and I think you're going to enjoy what I share today. And I also want to let you dolls know that today's video is dedicated to my daddy. This is a special time in our family. Christmas was always a big deal, and Christmas was actually the anniversary to me being introduced to 12 scale miniatures so many years ago when he bought my original dollhouse. So this video is dedicated to him because without my daddy, there would be no Little Gretchen's Workshop. So I hope you enjoy what I've prepared for you today, and thank you in advance for watching. Merry Christmas, dolls. Miss Maisie woke up as usual, singing really softly and grateful for the new day ahead. It was so common and typical in their home, and she's still doing it at the rooming house, really not realizing there are lots of other people in the house to consider. Little Claude was awake as well because growing up with Grandma singing in the morning, he never needed an alarm clock. Marva and Sterling awakened to the latch on the overhead ladder being loose. Marva was concerned about it falling on them. Sterling said that he would handle it and talk to the men about securing it. He told Marva that he thought that it was high time that he had a man-to-man talk with Sadie about the day that they met. Miss Marva agreed that was a good idea, but she urged Sterling not to forget about fixing the overhead ladder. Sterling left the room and went across the hall to knock on the door and see if Sadie was up. Sadie was in his room thinking about the kiss that Marguerite gave him in the laundry room. When he heard the knock at the door, it startled him. He answered and said, "Come in." When the door opened and Sterling's face appeared in the door, concerned that Sterling either knew about the fact that Marguerite had kissed him or that they had been talking in the back hall alone. When he realized Sterling came in peace, but wanted to talk to him man to man, Sadie was still concerned, but he wondered what the topic would be. And Sadie soon relaxed when he realized that Sterling wanted to talk to him and tell him more about how he knew his father. Meanwhile, in the parlor, Marguerite was happily decorating the tree and putting up all the decorations and things. Packages were coming in. She was wrapping gifts. She was really helping out getting everything set up for the children for Christmas. She wanted to surprise them and make Christmas special like her mother always did. Marva quietly walked in the room and saw what Marguerite was doing. She was proud that her daughter was able to create such a warm and cozy atmosphere for the children and the rest of the residents here in the rooming house. It made her feel very confident that she had taught her daughter well. She believed her daughter would make a lovely wife. After Marguerite was done with the tree, her mother took her to the dining room. Marva asked Marguerite where everything was. She needed to know where the china and the silverware and the table linens were. Marva was given the assignment to prepare, organize, and set up everything for the upcoming Christmas Eve party. And while they worked in the dining room, Marva talked to Marguerite about some of the duties she would have as a new wife after she got married. Meanwhile, back at the dress shop, two lovely ladies entered and talked to Aunt Janie about whether there was work available. The lady in the blue was named Miss Betty, and she had worked previously as a seamstress and an assistant shopkeeper in another town, but they were bought out by a larger store, and they no longer needed her. Aunt Janie called Aunt Bess down, and Miss Bess talked to Miss Betty about her skills and what she was able to do. And Aunt Bess looked at her dress and told her it was very lovely, and Miss Betty advised her that she had made her own dress and the dress her daughter was wearing. Aunt Bess was impressed with Miss Betty's work, and she was tickled to realize that the young lady that was with her was her daughter. Betty informed Miss Bess that Harper was 15, and although she did know a lot about sewing, she wasn't as skilled as her mother. But Aunt Bess assured Betty that she could keep Harper busy too. Meanwhile, back at the rooming house, there were so many people in town looking for food and places to stay, they had to open up the cafe without a grand opening because all the focus was on the dress shop. Inside, Lillian greeted Mr. Sherman and his wife Annabelle, and they had two lovely daughters, Pearl and Garnet. There was also another nice young man that was in town to find dresses for his daughter. He explained to Pop that he didn't have a wife and that he was going to really need some help getting things together for her. On the other side of the door in the music room, Big Ma was interviewing the new music teacher. Her name was Miss Marilyn. She was really nice, very kind. She loved children and was very excited and passionate about teaching music. Big Ma advised that there were a couple other instruments available beside the piano and that there were a couple children who were at different levels in their musical training, but they really needed someone to help them bring it all together. There was only one problem. The piano didn't have any black keys. Miss Marilyn had some serious concerns about that. Big Ma was certain with all the people in town she'll find someone to fix it. At the same time, on the second floor, Big Daddy was up early with Alvarez and Albert talking to them about the 3 empty rooms in the rooming house. He wanted to be proactive and make sure there was at least one room available. And with this many people visiting and in town, there's bound to be someone who needs somewhere safe and warm to stay. Albert immediately suggested that they get rid of all the cribs and cradles. Big Daddy and Alvarez laughed at Albert at the suggestion. They laughed at him and said, "You of all people shouldn't want to get rid of cribs." Albert quickly asked them, "What do you mean? Why would you say that?" Big Daddy and Alvarez teased Albert and told him based on the way that he looks at Violet, he would need a crib soon himself. In that moment, Big Daddy started to think about the other half of the third floor where there were 2 rooms that were being used to store extra furniture. They actually may have to be considered for housing because of all the dolls in town. And even up on the 3rd floor, there was another crib. On the other side of the room in the original dollhouse, Uncle Barley and Aunt Charlotte were enjoying their Christmas week together. Uncle Barley is always so busy with the men working at the rooming house and the dress shop and traveling on business. Aunt Charlotte was really, really glad to have him home. They had already shopped for Christmas and all the gifts were wrapped, so they were just waiting for the opening of the dress shop and for the big Christmas Eve party at the rooming house. Meanwhile, back at the rooming house kitchen, Violet and Isabel were bringing Aunt Vera, Aunt Benny's wife, up to date on all the happenings at the house since she had been gone. Violet told Aunt Vera about Aunt Bess and all the supplies being delivered to the dress shop unexpectedly and all the extra work the men had to do to accommodate the unexpected delivery, plus the arrival of Marguerite's family. Right while Violet was talking, Aunt Vera asked her if she was okay. Violet told Aunt Vera she had just been a little bit tired and she seemed to be hungry all the time. And Vera smiled and Isabel laughed. Meanwhile, little Hannah was trying to hurry up and finish her food so she could go see the Christmas tree. In the back hall at the bottom of the steps, we find Claude. Claude is 13 and a half and he really loves to read. Claude is really good at math and he's really interested in science. And there's really nobody around the rooming house his age. All the little boys are really small and then there are a whole bunch of little girls, which is no fun for him. And speaking of the boys, they were called down to the parlor to see the Christmas tree once Marguerite had finished. All of a sudden, one of the boys made a suggestion to the group. Then there was whispering, and suddenly there was a lot of scuffling, and they were rushing to get out of the room. Aunt Charlotte was gathering the girls over at the original dollhouse to take them to the rooming house to see the tree that Marguerite had just decorated. The girls were so excited when they entered the parlor because they could see the tree from a distance. It looked so beautiful. But when they got close to the tree and they looked on the floor, they could see that there were lots of broken candy cane nubs all over the rug. Chloe and Tracy started screaming. The little girls started to cry. Aunt Charlotte and Miss Maisie restrained themselves from laughing because they knew it had been the boys. Aunt Charlotte tried to console the girls and calm them down, but they continued to scream. Tracy and Chloe were just beside themselves in frustration. Mabel and little Cordelia really weren't that upset, but because the big girls kept screaming, they kept screaming and crying too. Tracy started to demand the boys should have to come clean this up. They need to pick up this mess. And Aunt Charlotte agreed. But Aunt Charlotte told Tracy it's only fair to make sure it was the boys that did it. Tracy said, "I know they did it." Aunt Charlotte summoned for the boys to come, and they all showed up, and they stood there looking a little bit guilty. They loved Aunt Charlotte, and they respected her a lot, and they didn't want her to be angry at them. and Charlotte questioned the boys in front of the girls standing back watching and listening. Finally, Arthur admitted that it was him and Joel who had made the suggestion, and all the rest of the boys went along with them. He asked her not to blame the little guys because they only followed along with what they were doing. The boys apologized and agreed to clean up their mess. Tracy said softly, "I knew it was them." Aunt Charlotte told Tracy, "That's enough now. The boys have apologized and they're going to clean up. So that's the end of it." The boys sometimes didn't like Tracy because she was always telling on them. She was older than all of them, and sometimes she acted like she was the boss. And although among the girls she was the oldest and therefore she was the boss, Joel and Arthur didn't feel like it worked like that because they weren't going to take orders from a girl. Miss Maisie sat back in sweet contentment listening to the children bicker and argue about broken candy canes. She laughed to herself about the circle of life and how today they're arguing and fighting about something so small and insignificant, but in a few years they'll want to marry each other. After the boys had cleaned up, Aunt Charlotte insisted that there be no more misbehavior because Christmas was coming up. Now, you young men don't want to find yourself in trouble or on punishment on Christmas Day, would you? They all gasped and shuddered at the thought of missing out on Christmas. Okay, you boys can go, but no more bad reports before Christmas. After the boys left, the little girls were tired and they climbed up in Miss Maisie's arms to take a nap. Although little Mabel was a little bit jealous that the little girls were taking a nap in her grandmother's arms, she didn't want to appear to be a baby in front of the big girls, so she just stayed in the circle. After the boys got through cleaning up their candy cane mess, they found their way up to the third floor in the attic storage room, the two rooms Big Daddy was considering turning into more bedrooms. The boys were excited that the door was unlocked. Arthur thought it would be a great place to be their hideaway, like a secret clubhouse. Nobody comes up here. Nobody uses this area. And although the area did look quite deserted, he had no idea of Big Daddy's plan. Arthur said, "This is where we'll have our meetings." Miguel asked, "Meetings about what?" Arthur said, "Whatever we want." Back at the dress shop, Aunt Janie had Harper up in the sewing room, instructing her on how she would assist during the grand opening with the orders and appointments for the ladies and girls. When they were almost done talking, Marguerite rushed in, and Aunt Janie immediately introduced the two. Aunt Janie told Marguerite that Harper would be working with them along with her mother down in the dress shop. Marguerite was really happy to meet Harper. Marguerite apologized for being so abrupt and busting in during their conversation, but there was nowhere to put the little girls' dresses before the grand opening. Aunt Janie informed her that the men had installed a temporary rack in the kitchen and that it should be just what she needed for the little girls' dresses. Marguerite was holding one of the dresses, and Harper asked her, "Did you make that?" Marguerite said, "Yes, I did." Harper said, "That's really nice. My mom sews really well like that, too." Marguerite graciously thanked her for the compliment and hurried downstairs to set up all the dresses that she had made for little girls to show at the dress shop. Earlier that week, Aunt Bess and Aunt Janie had worked out a contract with Miss Betty to allow her to work during the grand opening, and if things worked out, she could have a permanent position working there in the showroom. Miss Betty was very grateful because she hadn't had employment since she moved to town and things had been a little bit difficult. Miss Betty had had a husband, but he was porcelain and he fell and broke in so many pieces he couldn't be repaired. The big day had finally come, the grand opening of the dress shop. Aunt Bess was so happy and so proud when her daughter Charlotte walked in. Aunt Bess was beaming with pride. This was a dream come true for her. The first time she saw this lovely house, she knew it would be perfect to set up a dress shop. There had been so much traffic in the dress shop that the ladies decided they would have to close at least 2 o'clock on Christmas Eve in order to get ready for the big Christmas party at the rooming house. But it was wonderful sales. The ladies were having a wonderful time. Little Tracy was there admiring Marguerite's mother as she tried on hats and different things. And Charlotte was really beautiful, but Marguerite's mom, Miss Marva, was a different type of beautiful. She was a little bit older and more mature, and she had a lovely sophistication about her as well. Tracy really admired that a lot. And then in the midst of all the excitement, Big Ma walked in. Because remember, dolls, Big Ma is Aunt Janie's sister. And when she saw everything and all the people and all the beautiful things, she was so proud of her sister and proud of Aunt Bess. And although Aunt Bess had inconveniently ordered all the things for the dress shop, it really looked as though it had turned out to be a really great business decision. Things are really looking good as far as business because the money that they've made over the first 3 days of the grand opening, plus the money they're going to make from the appointments that are on the books and the special orders, it far exceeds the expense of the fixtures purchased for the dress shop. Charlotte talked to Aunt Bess about dresses for Tracy. She said she heard that Marguerite was quite a seamstress and that she needed some dresses especially made just for Tracy because she has outgrown a lot of her things. Tracy's getting older and she's getting really tall. Chloe was young enough to wear a lot of Tracy's hand-me-downs, but Tracy was so enamored with Miss Marva, she didn't even bother to go look in the room where all the little girls' dresses were. And Vera had agreed to escort the little girl whose father was traveling alone to help find dresses for her while they were here in town. Things worked out really well because she was very petite and Marguerite had clothes that were just her size, and that worked out well because her father wouldn't have to wait for special orders to come in. The little girl was really happy because she hadn't had dresses in a really long time. Marguerite tried to give her special attention because they heard she didn't have a mom. Marguerite was happy to realize that the dresses were a hit with the mothers and the children. When Marguerite took the traveler's daughter to the cash register to pay, Hannah was relieved because that meant it was her turn and she dashed for the dress she wanted to try on. In the main part of the showroom, there was so much hustle and bustle, all you could hear was the sound of the cash register pinging and clicking on top of the sound of the rustle and shuffle of boxes and bags being packaged and wrapped. Just below the sound of sweet chatter and laughter of women satisfied and happy with their newfound treasures. Charlotte pulled Marguerite aside to let her know what a fine job she had done on those beautiful girls' dresses. She told her she was very impressed with her being such a skilled seamstress at such a young age. Charlotte also offered her support with regards to the wedding plan. As Aunt Bess announced that the store would be closing soon, everyone made their final selections, and then one by one they began to file out. Some of the ladies were having so much fun that they had forgotten that it was Christmas Eve and there was so much still to do. Now that the grand opening was over, there was a big Christmas Eve party at the rooming house. Closing early on Christmas Eve was a good idea so they'd have time to get ready. Aunt Charlotte stopped by the rooming house before she went home to announce and let everyone know that her and Uncle Barley wouldn't be at the big Christmas Eve party, that they were going to be spending Christmas Eve at home alone. Big Ma insisted that Charlotte allow the girls to stay there with them and that her and Uncle Barley will see them in the morning. Big Ma and Aunt Vera laughed and told Charlotte they understood. Big Ma told Charlotte to go home and enjoy herself. Children would be in her care till the morning. Meanwhile, back at the dress shop, everyone was gone. The door was locked. Aunt Bess was so excited to close, she forgot to take the open sign off the door. Aunt Bess had locked the door, and now the ladies were starting to count their profits. Aunt Janie and Betty counted the drawer down, and little by little the ladies separated the bills until they got to the first dollar earned. Aunt Bess had saved a really special frame to put the first dollar earned on the wall. And after they framed it and mounted it on the wall, the ladies were so proud and happy because this was a day they'd always remember that their dream was finally coming true. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, and it was Pop. It was getting late and it was dark, and it was time for the ladies to come to the rooming house for the party. Pop said he came to escort them so they wouldn't walk alone. When Pop saw Miss Betty, he was blown away by her beauty. Miss Betty blushed a little and she said hello. Aunt Janie and Aunt Bess introduced Pop to Miss Betty. Although she had been in town a few days, he had never met her. Aunt Janie explained to Pop that Miss Betty was new in town and that she would be working as a clerk and a seamstress at the dress shop. Just then Pop gave Miss Betty a big smile and she smiled back. On the second floor, Miss Marva was getting a little bit frustrated with not having room to put all of her new things. As the finishing touches came together in the dining room, the guests were starting to gather in the house. Pop saw Miss Betty in the hallway and greeted her again. Pop told Miss Betty it sure was nice meeting her this evening for the first time, and he would like an opportunity to spend some time with her and get to know her better. Aunt Betty agreed. Before the big party started, Big Ma and Big Daddy gathered everyone in the dining room to say grace and bless the food, and to take a moment to be grateful for all the many blessings that everyone had received over the past year. And in the midst of the silence and reflection, some laughed, some cried, some smiled, but regardless to how they expressed it, everyone was grateful to have another opportunity to celebrate Christmas surrounded by family and friends and a warm, loving community. So on behalf of the Dolls and Little Gretchen's Workshop, I want to say a Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in 2024 on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye bye now, dolls.